What do you think is the difference between doing business in UK, US, Dubai?
The UK is the hardest place to do business, I think.
What do you think makes a good culture in a company?
But a lot of the smaller companies who deliver outstanding stuff are too scared to actually premium price.
I think it's just about having that confidence of doing that. When I started on house rounds, so like I had about 600 houses.
They say one of the great qualities of a good leader is consistency. So calmness and consistency is absolutely critical. If the leader gets emotional, particularly if they have mood swings and everything else, that's extraordinarily difficult to follow.
Is there any tricks or anything that you would add on how to kind of work a business plan?
You have to have some realism in implementation or execution of a plan. Most business plans are a summary of wishes.
Welcome to Working On It, the podcast for service-based business founders who want to scale without burning out. Today's guest is Stephen Reid. Stephen has a vast operational knowledge and is the go-to guy for strategic systems. Thanks for listening, and let's get into the show. So Steve, welcome to Working On It. Thank you very much for coming along. I really appreciate it. I've done a bit of research into you.
Oh dear, worry.
So am I right in saying you've built, scaled and led businesses across the UK, US, Europe and Middle East? You've been a founder, a managing director, a chair, a board advisor, and were you a cleaner and a tea maid?
Probably in the past.
Have I missed anything? I mean,
No.
Is that right?
No. I did actually, my very first job, they asked me to make the coffee.
Oh,
yeah, and I made it so badly they never asked me again, which was perfect, really.
Was that intentionally?
It was intentional.
Yeah. I thought so. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's the way to do it. But so let's go back to the beginning. What really got you into business and wanting to kind of have that leadership role, or was that just you fell into it, or just you enjoyed it, experience? What was it?
A bit of both. I don't know about sort of star signs, but I'm an Aries, so I have some Aries traits, and I think leadership is something that I've always enjoyed, whether through school and then into work, and I've always wanted to do more. I didn't set out specifically to be a leader. It's just something that I enjoyed. I enjoyed the responsibility. And I suppose part of that was that it was seizing opportunities as they came along. Yeah. I've always felt that if people want something and they push hard enough, they don't wait to be told or asked. They grab it, and it's easier to be forgiven afterwards if you've done something wrong or you've done too much than it is to ask permission in the first place. So you just take
right.
it.
Yeah.
And I suppose, I was fortunate. I was pretty successful when I was younger, but I did some things that, for me, were quite natural. I mean, I spent a period of my early life as a sales guy, and it was back in the day where you kind of had to do X number of calls in a day, and book X amount of business and all this kind of stuff. And it was in many ways just doing numbers of calls. So you can say I've done X amount of calls seemed madness to me. Yeah. I could do a third of the calls, but book twice the amount of business that I needed to because I spent more time with them. And I could nurture those potentially really good accounts and get more out of them than simply just actually ticking the boxes. Yeah. And I know that sounds kind of trivial, but if you apply that generally and say, where do I get the most productivity? Where do I get the biggest impact? And you look for those opportunities, life somehow is easier. Yeah. You're actually starting to, you focus, you prioritize, you work on the stuff that's going to give you the return. So I suppose that really kind of was part of the early days. And then I found myself in a leadership role relatively early. I think I joined the first board of a company with about 300 people how old was I? I don't know, 35, I think. So when I moved into my first board role. and I've been on boards in different sized companies ever since.
I mean, that's quite a young age at 35. I mean, you must have built quite a lot of business, I guess, acumen by then, isn't it? Like, to be on a board, what size company was that then at 35?
We employed 300 people.
Wow.
And it's difficult. The company, when I left it, I can't remember when I joined. It was quite small. It wasn't 300 people then. It was I can't remember what it was. Probably about half of that. But we moved it to almost £40 million turnover by the end.
Jeez, wow, that's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
But do you think that when you go in there, do you think sort of that proactive kind of willingness that you have in you to just take that next, well, basically leap, and like the net will appear, isn't it, in a sense, isn't it, in that sort of analogy?
Yeah, I think
kind of got you that far so early on, like actually not waiting around. You know that thing? What was that thing when they say good things come to those who wait, but great things come to those who go and get them? It's almost like that for you that was well, I'm not hanging around. I'm just going to make sure that I just get on from the backside and go and do it myself. Make sure it happens.
Yes, I mean you've got to have a couple of things that go with that. One is you've got to have an employer that has an ambition as well.
That's true.
That actually is prepared to be pushed.
Yeah.
So you do need you do need to be in sync with that individual. The second thing is you need good people. All my success has come through the people I've recruited. It's always bothered me that the kind of typical British or English style of management is power-based, that you have to have situations where you kind of suppress the people that are below you. I see it now. I see it in companies that I advise now that really frustrate me, where people get to a position and they protect their position. They protect their position by not allowing people to come through. And it's terribly short-sighted, because I recruited people who I knew could do my job and probably could do it better.
Yeah.
And they pushed me. So I got better, but I also got reflected glory from the stuff that they did. So my success came through the nurturing of the teams that helped us to grow. So it wasn't just down to me. It was down to me to provide some kind of direction and leadership, but most of all, some support. People know when they're doing well. They don't need telling they're doing well. They need to be told that they're doing well when they're not doing well. They need the support. They need the confidence boosting when times are tough. And providing you can keep the team motivated and focused and working for each other, so everybody's got each other's backs, then you get a successful team.
That's so funny you say that, because it's so true. But I think that is a mindset of a good leader, though. Yeah, what you just said about where you're not afraid of developing other people, even if it means that they go above you, or even do your job better than you're currently doing it. Yeah. I think that's a sign of good leadership, which eventually obviously leads to great growth, which mentions your turnover of 40 million in such a short space of time with your first board appointment. So I think with that, so I've actually got a question about culture.
Right.
So let's address that now. What do you think makes a good culture in a company?
Well, I think the leader of the business is central to a good culture, and the leader has to lead by example. But I think it's difficult. There's so many companies at the moment that talk about culture and their virtue signalling, and I don't know what makes a culture. I think it's for me it's been never asking people to do things that you're not prepared or capable of well, I say not capable, not prepared to do yourself. It's also being sensitive to the people themselves and understanding what they want from it, emotionally, career-wise, and everything else. But I also think it's looking outside the business and saying, what do my customers or clients actually want? Is my culture delivering what they want as receivers? But it all starts at the top. I don't know how you define a culture. particularly.
Yeah, but I think it's exactly like I had. Where's it gone now? Yeah, so because I think like you got like you got the vision, mission, and that sort of thing. Like it's not just Brad Sugars, but it's Brad Sugar. I wasn't coached by Brad Sugars, but I was coached by a couple of these action coach guys, and they talk about that a lot, and it's sort of like vision, mission, culture. But it's great, but I think it works both ways, isn't it? It's almost like from the top down, from the down top to the bottom up, in a sense that it goes up and down. Because I know for myself, I also have down days, bad days, but sometimes my team pick me up. So you mentioned about being down, and it's funny because we've had a couple of guys over the years where they do struggle a little bit with that sort of motivation and that sort of thing, and getting going. But you think there's no point; they're already in the gutter, as I say. Sort of like mentally speaking, in a sense, they're already in the gutter. They're already feeling down. What's the point in kicking them even further? Try and get them out. Try and find a glimmer of hope or something that's positive that they do, and then bring them up, and then build upon that. And that's what I've always done, and I felt that's really, really helped. But then in return, it also helps me, because there's sometimes if the leader's having a bad day, then the people around you also pick me up. I just I speak from my own experience in that. But I don't know. I think sort of culture's both ways. I know it. Eventually, it starts on the top, and to build that. But I think it's great when you've got it, because then it's.
Yes.
I don't know what you would put. Yeah, you're right. Actually, I don't know what would actually. You couldn't really put one word on it, could you? Or it's even just one sentence, perhaps.
No.
But I think it's just sort of like a collective of like just multiple things and multiple good people, as you say, all looking out for each other both ways, regardless of. I mean, we don't really have titles in Aquamark. It's just like it's just what it is. We all get together and we all pull together and go to one vision or along the journey. But it's just, I think it's just everybody coming together, and like Richard Brandt says, isn't like a business is like a collection of people. Like with one organisation, it's just a collection of people put together, and I think that's really quite good, isn't it? In the sense that like it's so true. It's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And it's just building those people, that team of good people, and eventually I think just good people to do good things, and that just builds that culture.
Yeah. Branson's not one of my heroes, but
is he not?
No.
I only mention it because obviously like that part of like a collection of people is just one organisation.
I think that bit's very true, and it is interesting. I think you've always got to have a kind of foil in some ways. I know many companies don't. They have a founder who drives everything, but I've always found that when I have worked for somebody, it's tend to go in one or two directions. Either that person's very much a visionary, and I think I'm quite creative, but I've acted as the foil, trying to pick out the good ideas and help nurture those.
What do you mean the foil?
Well,
the foil?
A balance,
Okay.
if you want, because if you've got somebody who is a really creative individual at the top who's always coming up with ideas, you need somebody to be able to filter those and say, actually, that one's good. You can't act on everything, and you don't want to lose the ones that are good. So you've got to be able to manage that person in terms of pulling out the good ideas and making sure that they get implemented. The other way around is you've got somebody who's a real detail person, but they need somebody who's creative. So it works the other balance. And I've done kind of both roles when I've worked for people, and you find I don't know what you want to call it. Well, it's a working relationship, of course, but it's a balance. You and then when I started my own companies, in fact, before that, I employed a guy who was the polar opposite to me, but we've stayed friends forever. We still are friends, and he joined me each company I moved in. When I set my business up, he and I worked together as partners in the business. We had entirely different styles, but where I could be fairly hard-nosed and and driving and perhaps at times insensitive, he would be the guy that would have the humour and make everybody feel comfortable. And so, and again, it worked. It worked as a team.
A good balance.
And it created it. So, and it's quite odd because some of the things I look at when I'm talking to people I advise now is that when I was working for somebody, working in companies, despite the role that I had in the organisation, I adapted what I did to the company in some ways. I don't mean I changed my personality, but different companies, as we talked about earlier, have different cultures, and you work with the team you've got, and you look at their sensitivities, and you kind of adjust your behaviour, I suppose, to work for the best for the organisation.
Yeah.
When you start your own business, I found I became different. You run your own business, and every day is a challenge. When you're really busy, you're on it, trying to make sure it's going like clockwork. When it's not busy, you're working damned hard to try and make it busy. There's always issues with people. Not just disciplinary, but just because people they get ill, they have problems. So there's always issues to deal with. And so when you're running the show, everything is down to you. Now, for me, I got in the early days sort of almost too focused. So the kind of lighter side, sort of, which is why I needed my other guy, because he provided the light side, and I was the kind of. I think I recognised it, but that's why he was so good, because that made the whole thing work well. And I do think that sometimes when you're a single founder in an organisation, you don't have somebody that's pulling you up. You think you're doing everything right. Very few entrepreneurs do everything right. I mean, you mentioned Branson before. He's had huge numbers of failures in his businesses. The guy that set up EasyJet. Most entrepreneurs have one really, really outstanding success in their life and go on to do other things, and very few of them are successful. And I remember back in the States working for somebody who'd built this enormous company. It really was a big company from nothing. Extraordinary individual. Really driven, really passionate, I think quite a good leader. But he'd started to make some mistakes. And I remember sitting with him thinking, this guy's built this company and he's asking me for advice. And I've not done anything of the scale this guy has done. And I felt, I don't know what the word is, not embarrassed, but unqualified in some ways. I thought, it seemed the wrong way round to me. But he'd realised that he didn't know everything. You always assume that people have built something very big. I've got this magic touch or Midas touch that's always going to keep on going. And of course they get to points where they're out of their comfort zone. And this thing had got so big, he didn't know how to deal with it. He wanted it to be big, but he was employing the wrong people. He went out to bigger companies to get the kind of the level of people that he thought he needed. But they were corporate people coming into a private organisation that he'd built, and their culture was entirely different. And they were political animals, and he wasn't political, and neither was the team that he'd built. So suddenly you had this friction in the company which was never there before. These people wanted to put in huge systems into the company that were an anathema to the way the business had run. It had been extraordinarily agile and it had been very client-centric. These systems didn't help that. In fact, they fought against it. All companies need systems, but it was almost counterintuitive in some ways. And so all sorts of fault lines were appearing. And that's where you need almost an outside perspective to say, just hold on, let's just take a step back here.
Yeah.
Let's just assess what's made you successful so far. Where do you want to go, and let's map out how we get there. Let's not react because we're trying to sort problems on a daily basis. Our production. We need somebody who's much higher power in production. Do we?
Yeah.
So this plan. This comes back to the planning bit, I suppose, which we haven't touched on. But having a clear strategic is an overused word. It's a straightforward. What are we going to do with our business? Where are we going to go? What do we need to get there, and how are we going to do it?
So there's a few things actually. That was really good. But do you know what I think is, like when you reach a goal, and obviously, I guess this company, is huge, $100 million?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
So that's amazing. From one guy as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
That's absolutely amazing.
In 20 years, it was phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. But, and like when you do something, but I think it's the individual, like exactly what you said earlier on about where you didn't want to sit still, you wanted to go out and get it yourself. And I think once you get to a certain level, when you're there, you suddenly think that it's done, I need the next thing. And I don't know this guy, but I'm only guessing because you think, like, when you get to a certain level, you then think, okay, I want more. In order for me to get there, I have to think different. That thing that got you to 1 million won't get you to 10 million. You have to think differently.
Yeah.
And I wondered if perhaps he got to that point where he's sort of like, okay, well, I need to now go corporate. I need to go massive, But perhaps it wasn't the right thing because it probably lost its culture, probably lost its personality.
Yes.
But then you think, but that's what got you there, and that personality. Don't change that, that core fundamental reason as to what got you there. You don't want to change that. But I think that's probably just the individual. Once you've got to a certain level, you then want to push for the next thing. And you can only think that, but at the end of the day, like, we're all humans. So you sound about he asked you for advice or as a sounding board. I think everybody does that. And I think that's quite powerful that he actually didn't have that pride. I mean, okay, I've got to this, and you've not really done what I've done, so I'm not even going to ask you. But the fact that he opened up is quite humbling in a sense. That you think, well, that's probably one of his values that he's got that's got him to where he is. Thinking, okay, I know that I don't know everything. I appreciate that, but I still want to grow. I want more. And I think that's a very good characteristic to have. That's amazing because a lot of people think they get to a certain level, which really isn't, 9 times out of 10 isn't a massive level, and they think they've done it all, and that's it. You think it's quite a limited way of thinking, But you mentioned plans, and so you mentioned obviously planning, etc. And
let me take you back one step a bit to culture, and then come on to plans.
Yeah, okay.
For something you said, this guy wasn't interested in building a corporate, but his success came out of the fact that he focused entirely on his clients. That's what built his business. The whole culture was customer first. And everything was designed around making sure that the customers he served, he delivered the very best service, most responsive, everything. When you get to a kind of corporate size, if you like, or you get to that point, you bring corporate people in, they're interested in their own positions quite often. They're interested in their career advancement. The client is secondary. Now, that's a sweeping generalization. It's not true in every, but you think of some of the very big corporates. It's very inward focused about getting on the next rung of that ladder. It's about your personal advancement in that and how good you look in those organizations. The client is distant from you. So the culture, when you bring people like that in, changes. And that's the bit I think you've got to be careful of. It's getting the right people in. What's made the company successful, and are the people you bring in going to continue that success? If they're going to change the culture in the business, then you have a big risk. So onto your planning.
Yeah. No, that's actually really, really true. It's so true because the moment you take the focus back off of the customer, they're used to having that focus on them. And I believe that the customer feels that shift, you know, so you think, oh, they got too big, or they're taking her off the ball. And now they're suddenly looking elsewhere. That relationship that you had is suddenly starting to crumble a little bit. And I think so that's really profound what you just said there. Yeah, that's brilliant. So yeah, and then the corporate thing, like you say, it goes back to, like, I think the leadership thing goes where you sort of like develop people, suddenly goes out the window because it's only just all for one, you know, like just to look after number one, that was the end of it. So yeah, and it's and of course shareholders, and you've got to report to them at the board meetings, which you know plenty about. So you know, it's not just so much about the customer focus, it's now number focus at the end of every month, what's showing on the balance sheet, you know. So yeah, it does shift a little bit, doesn't it?
It does.
That's really good. So, but the planning, it's not on the questions, but I'm glad you touched on it because you know that I love to plan. So what would be the key things if someone wants to put together a business plan? Now, I love the one, I'm quite like you go back to the detailed person, and you got the traction, the book EOS. Rob loves it, doesn't he? He loves the EOS traction stuff. So you got the visionary and the implementer, haven't you? So it's in their version, and it's like I think it's sort of a powerful word, visionary, because then you start, when you think visionary, you think Elon Musk, Steve Jobs. Do you know what I mean? Jeff Bezos, all these things, and you think, don't even brand me with that sort of label. Do you know what I mean? But you think it's someone that comes up with these ideas. But then you do need that implementer that's just going to sit there and do it and understand all the details and what needs to make it so it then comes to life.
Yes.
And with that, obviously you got the planning, etc. And I kind of sort of go for the 12 months and the 5 years, and then I've always said you break it backwards, so you kind of like start with the end in mind. You go 5 years, 12 months, and then quarterly and monthly, weekly. But what would you, is there any tricks or anything that you would add with your experience on how to kind of work a business plan in a summarised version? What would you say would be the headlines?
Well, I think what you said is true. You have to have some realism in implementation or execution of plan, because most business plans are a summary of wishes. They aren't a plan at all. You know, we're going to be 50 million in 5 years, and you're turning over 5 now. Well, yeah, we all have those kind of dreams, but is that a plan? No, that's an ambition. There's nothing wrong with having the ambition, providing you can map out a route that enables you to achieve that ambition. And one of the things that I have found since I took up consultancy, but also it was evident in companies before, but is that each of the companies I've talked to, most of them, not all, but most of them, probably 80% of them, have a vision but have no understanding of how they're going to get there. And they don't know how to do a plan. It scares them. They can write all the words out about, you know, we do this and this is what the market opportunity is and these are our competitors and this is our kind of sales plan. Although again, it's not. It says, you know, we'll increase by 15% a year. And you say, well, okay, that's great, but how are you going to increase by 15% a year? You know, what steps are you going to take that you're not doing now that's going to give you that increase? So I think you're right that you can start at the end and say, this is where I want to be in 5 years' time, say. And these are my milestones working backwards. And this is what we've got to achieve in the first year to create that platform for that further growth. And then you can break it down to those quarterly areas. But the things you've got to build into that as well is, do you have the bandwidth to do it? You know, in terms of physical resource. Do you have the money to do it? Who is leading on each of the areas? Does everybody buy into it? Have you got the full support of the team to do that? How does it fit with what you're doing at the moment? Does it create any wholesale changes that may discomfort your clients or your employees. So I think it's more than just writing a plan. I think there's all sorts of bits in there that are really, really fundamental. And the plan should be written, for me, by the board. You can have the vision set by the founder or the owner or whatever you want to call it. But the coming together should be the whole team. The team has to have ownership, and they have to be held accountable for delivering against it. But one of the great failings is that people set out things to do, but don't give themselves time to do it. I mean, a classic example is, I don't know, just think about it. We want to have geographical expansion. Where? Why? What research are you going to do to be able to sort out whether that's viable? How much will it cost? What do you need to get there? What are the hurdles? Doing the risk profile and everything else. So all of that takes time to establish. So you may say, well, actually, I'm going to open up in, I don't know where, to be fanciful, North America next year. Well, what do you know about North America? Which bit of North America? You know, it's a big continent. So which bit are you going to go to? Why are you going to go there? You know, what are the opportunities that are there? What are the obstacles of getting into the place? You know, what will you need? And so typically what happens in a plan is that people don't do all the necessary work. And so a year down the road, it's still on their plan. We're going to have this geographical expansion. Well, you haven't done anything in this year. You know, how much money have you spent researching where you're going to go, and is it right for you? Yeah. So I think those bits need to be built into the plan so that you have measurable outcomes all the way. And that measurable outcome doesn't necessarily mean pounds, shillings, and old stuff.
Shows your age there.
I did show my age, but it doesn't have to be monetary. But it has to be quantifiable.
Yeah.
And then you know you're actually moving in a track. And I suppose it's, you know, I see it when I'm talking to startups that are doing pitch decks, and they all have this hockey stick. You know, we're going to go here, and suddenly we're going to go up there, and all of them say, oh well, you know, we need X amount of money for development and so forth. And the investor or potential investor is saying, well, that's okay, yeah, I understand that, but when am I going to start getting returns? So, and if you don't know how you're going to monetize all of that stuff, and when the investor is going to get returns, you don't get any investment. So it really is, for me, it's the whole thing about a business plan is the nuts and bolts are much more important in many ways than the vision.
Yeah.
The vision is the easy bit to write. How you achieve the vision, for me, is the real hard bit.
Yeah, and I think it's like you say, it's actually even the nuts and bolts. Like when we do ours, sort of like plan for the year and so on, we even break it down. And what we found helpful is I was exactly like you said, Stephen. What you said, like about I'd had this vision of, oh yeah, and then we're going to do this, we're going to do hockey stick, and it was amazing. And then a year later, you're like, well, what's actually been done on any of this plan? You know, none of it. Yeah. And what I then found out was it's exactly as you said, the nuts and bolts part, because in it. But as you're doing it, you're bringing it to life as well, even more so. Yeah. So we even narrowed it right down to, okay, we're going to recruit, like we even know how are we going to do this new turnover? How are we going to achieve this? Who's going to do it? So let's break it down. How many staff do we need? So then we had to break down how many or how much individual member of the team brought in per year. And okay, so if we wanted to expand another £1 million, okay, we need X amount of staff. Yeah. But what's it going to cost to bring them in with the training, etc.? So then we broke down as how much do we need up front to bring in 10 staff. When it worked out like nearly £3,000 training and equipment just to get them started, well, we can't bring in 10 in one go because we haven't got the money for that. So okay, we need to dial that back a little bit, you know. Okay, 2-year plan, suddenly is maybe now 4 or 5 year plan, you know. Yeah. So there's all that sort of thing. But it's only when you start to, like you say, the nuts and bolts of it. One, it comes to life. But two, it then makes you realise if it's reality or not, or if it's doable or not, you know? Yeah. And that's the difference between the vision. You can sit there laying in bed and, I'm going to do 50 million next year. You know what I mean? Well, how? Okay, maybe I'll do one. You know, but when you start breaking it down, so it's really true you say about the nuts and bolts part.
And also the fact that almost every company falls into the trap of trying to do too much at the same time.
Yeah.
Too many initiatives all running at the same time. And you need to prioritise and say, okay, if we only achieve 3 things this year, this is what's going to change the dial.
Yeah.
Let's focus on just getting that right. Once we've done that, we'll do the 4th one on the list and the 5th one on the list, and you get into a rhythm, and it can go faster. But you're seeing the success. You start with 20 and you end up with 20 because you can't devote enough time to do it all.
Yeah.
And I think also there's this trap as well, that people talk about growth in revenue terms and not in profit terms.
Yeah.
Not every company has to be big. Some of the really successful small companies get hugely high fees because they have premium pricing because they deliver an outstanding service, and they get growth naturally because they are so good. But they don't go chasing revenue. They keep on delivering a better and better service that ups the ante, so people want it more and pay more for it. And the growth comes on the back of what they deliver rather than the fact that they just keep chasing numbers.
Yeah.
And this whole thing about pricing strategies is really important. I mean, it's a pretty common example to use things like the aeroplane. If you turn left or turn right, the price difference is huge, but the service difference isn't worth that. And the same with a motor car. It doesn't necessarily costs 4 times as much to sell a premium to build a premium car as it does a less expensive car, but the brand will carry the price. Businesses seldom work like that, interestingly. Some have got it really absolutely on the nail. I mean, you look at some of the luxury brands and they absolutely have got it. But a lot of the smaller companies who deliver outstanding stuff are too scared to actually premium price. They deliver exceptional stuff, but they're scared to put their prices up in case they lose their customers. And you need that bit of bravery. You need that confidence to be able to say, actually, I'm delivering twice the value anybody else is, and you have to pay a premium for that. And that's quite hard for people who've built a business from scratch to actually get up to that kind of thinking.
Yeah, and I think it's just sort of having that confidence of doing that. Like when I started on house rounds, so like I had about 600 houses, and then I think, do you know what? I'm just going to put it up by 15% right across the board. And I had houses at £4, I had houses at £30. Doesn't matter. It was the same percentage increase. But we lost a couple, but not many. But all of a sudden, the same amount of work suddenly went up, and it more than covered the loss. Yeah. But then all of a sudden I'm doing the same work, but now I'm getting paid more. There's more net profit at the bottom. And so I mentioned houses because that was when I've done sort of like a across the board thing. But it's exactly the same in any business, I think. You mentioned about US.
Yeah.
So I wanted to pull on your knowledge, your worldwide knowledge. Why do you reckon people are leaving the UK, the millionaires and billionaires?
I think we've lost our way badly here. There was a time when as I started getting older, I thought I was just becoming a grumpy old man when I used to moan about the country, and then I talked to my own kids, and they feel the same way.
Really? Wow.
I have a granddaughter who's growing up now and well into her teens, and her ambition is not necessarily to be here. I mean, we have 2 daughters, one in Australia and one in Mexico now, who have thriving careers over there. And there are still opportunities here. The grass is always greener somewhere else. I don't think the States is like it used to be. I think it used to be a real land of opportunities, as they say. I don't think it is as much now. I think there's an awful lot of people struggling over there. But the difference in the States and here has always been the fact that if you try something in the States and you fail, people will say, don't worry, you'll succeed next time. Over here, they say, well, I could have told you that was going to happen.
The crab mentality, isn't it?
It is. And I mean, when you look at the moment about the kind of it doesn't matter what political stripe you are, the majority of the public thinks they're all as bad as one another now. I mean, there is a loss of confidence in the government per se, quite generally. Our economy is in the toilet, and showing no great signs of improvement. And we have the highest tax burden now we've ever had. The climate is not creating, the economic climate is not creating confidence, I don't think, for a lot of people. So people who have got money are saying, well, I'm not going to stay and simply be taxed and get nothing from it. They have the choice. They can move, and I think that people are moving because I don't think we have a vision for the future. I listen to podcasts, and I particularly like the Rest Is Politics with Boris Stewart and Alistair Campbell.
Okay.
And one of their recent ones, and it was and when they'd interviewed Jeremy Hunt over a couple of sessions, talking about needing a bold, radical plan that gave people confidence that we were going to get back on track. This government, I'm not making a comment about a particular party, this government at the moment does not have a radical plan. There was also an interesting thing. I mean, I will declare my hand that I'm not a Trump supporter. I dislike the man. But one of the things that's interesting is that Trump has an uncanny knack of tapping in to the people in the country. He's on social media. He's watching TV. He's doing all the bits. I'm not saying this is right, but if our Prime Minister spent more time engaging with a customer instead of being worried about the Westminster bubble, then he may be more in tune with what's happening. I'm not suggesting the people before him were any better, but we actually need a leader in the country.
Yeah, and I think that's where you touched on the Trump things, because he's had all that experience of leading companies. That he's bringing those skill set into running a country, which effectively is a company, if you like, essentially, a group of people. But I'm with you there, Steve. I think if we had somebody like that, then like that would really take the bull by its horns and say, this is what it is. It's going to be a rough road, but let's do it together. Because like I've always said, like the minority ruin it for the majority in any organisation, in any group of people, I think. And I think really, like, British people are great people. Like, if you gave them the vision, they'd all be on board. There might be a minority that might not, or whatever. But you think if you started to show results and live up to what you said, then I think that everyone would be on board.
Yes.
And I think it would be absolutely brilliant, for this country. It would be amazing. Unfortunately, there's nothing in the pipeline yet, but yeah.
Well, I think you look, without getting overly political about
Yeah,
it.
exactly. Yeah.
You look at the social security system in this country is broken. And everybody knows it's broken.
Yeah.
Everybody knows it's broken. But again, this government's rode back on it, a couple of months ago, and those are the things that change people's view. They say, okay, well, it's pretty. I didn't, I'm not suggesting we shouldn't harm people, but it's interesting. We spend, I believe, it's 44 billion on benefits for people with mental anxiety. We spend 1 billion on a cure, which is not cure, sorry, therapy sessions, which is regarded as world leading around the world. We could treble our spend on therapies, and have some positive results that work for the people that were suffering as well as the country, instead of keep pouring more and more money into keeping these people out. I mean, the one thing that people have with social anxiety with the one people with mental anxiety need is social interaction.
Yeah.
That helps them.
Yeah, there's been a big dropping out.
You keep paying them money to stay at home. They don't get that social interaction. It doesn't actually make them any better. Anyway, sorry, enough philosophizing here.
Yeah, so yeah.
You can edit this out.
Yeah, no, it's great stuff. It's great stuff. So what I wanted to ask was, what do you think is the difference between doing business in UK, US, and I'm going to throw a spanner in the works, Dubai? Or Middle East?
Well, the UK is the hardest place to do business, I think, by some way. I started doing business in the States quite a long time ago, and I've worked obviously for an American company. I've also set up a company in the US, and generally speaking, people will give you an audience. It's not difficult to talk to people. I don't necessarily give you loads of business on day one, but they make time for you, and they're generally looking for new ways to improve their own businesses. So they'll talk to you. They have allegiances and everything else, so you don't break all that down immediately. But it makes life a little easier in the sense that you can actually cultivate relationships and networks and so forth. And I think it's in the sense of being able to win business in the States is probably easier. At the same time, it's quite hard to continue, to keep all your business all the time, because if they are open to new ideas, you've got to be on your game to make sure that you are giving them what they need. I also think sometimes it's difficult because there's a slightly different mentality in the States that everything's the sort of contractor's fault. There's no such thing as partnering. It's a very transactional relationship for the main part. Again, I'm generalising. I mean, it's a big country, and I think you find different nuances depending on which part of the States you're working in. Similarly, I think that the Middle East was when I was there was fantastic. It's a work hard, play hard culture, always has been, but it's also big. A lot of the growth has been, certainly in the businesses I've worked in, a lot of expats involved there, big expat community, and so big networking. And if you're doing a good job and you've got a good reputation, people will say, "Have you talked to so-and-so?" So you find yourself in this kind of position where for me, it worked. It was fun. It was exciting. It was extraordinarily hard work. I mean, people start work very, very early and typically work very late in the Middle East, which is not the same in the States. They typically start early and finish early.
Oh, okay.
I'm not talking about New York or I'm talking about but
generally, yeah.
By and large in the States, it's but I think to a degree not quite the same in Asia, but again, the places I worked, which in Singapore and Hong Kong and primarily, I mean that very much the same. Australia, where I did some business and I have a daughter. Again, a bit like the Americans, they'll give you an audience. You talk to them. They're up for new information, for new ideas.
Yeah.
We are very close-minded here. We it's hard to break ground in the UK, I think.
I think, like, from my take of it, like it's almost with the US. From I've never done business in the US, but from what I can see from the outside looking in, is that new visionaries, the trying to make a difference, trying to improve yourself and others, is applauded, in a sense. And I think in Dubai, from what I can see, because I know a couple of people have left here and gone to start businesses up there, some young lads as well, and a couple of different age groups and such, with families, without. But the one thing that does resonate with all of them is the fact that, again, it's almost applauded, like it's encouraged. And I think, and I don't know, perhaps you'll say it's not, I'm wrong, but I don't get that same vibe in the UK. It's as you said, like, well, I told you so. You didn't have to. Didn't have to try it. I would have told you anyway. But it's out there. It seems to be like it's really, really encouraged and basically you've got a few fans that want to really rooting for you, you know. And I think when you're going through some tough times, that's going to be the measure of failure and success in a sense, because you know, like when you're down, you've got a few fans that are encouraging you, and you're going on. Whereas saying here, in a sense, it's almost like when you're down, people are saying, "Well, yeah, I told you." You know what I mean? So you think, "Well, now where do I go?" You know, so you start second guessing yourself and having doubts. And I think that's probably the difference between the two, anyway.
I think it is. I mean, the Middle East has the benefit of having money. You know, large sovereign wealth funds, which
is huge.
Which means that they've turned the Western model on its head, in the sense that if they say, okay, well, I'm going to build the world's biggest and most modern port, and once they do that, people will come, and of course they did. You know, the same with Emirates Airline as an example. You know, we'll build this airline, and it will be the this kind of flag carrier for the world. You know, it'll be the biggest transit hub and everything else. Well, and Emirates is a massive airline, and very much a world leader. And the other ones, you know, whether it's Qatar Airways is also big, and it's, you know, Qatar's a relatively small country, very rich country, of course, but so they haven't used our model where they wait for the demand to be there. They build something to create the demand, and the demand follows it. So it's a really interesting model.
That's the vision we spoke.
Yeah. But they also deliver what they say. Well, not all the time. I mean, no, I'll rephrase that. They don't always deliver what they say, but they do keep pushing ahead. They're ambitious. I think that's the thing. They are ambitious. I mean, and you compare it. You asked about this country. You look at things like, we're going to build however many houses, but we haven't actually addressed the issues that stop it happening. We talk about reforming the planning system. The planning system in London is so dire. There's no hope that they will ever achieve those targets, because they won't, because everything is structured against it. So they haven't removed all the obstacles, but they've set some wonderful target. Now, I think you do have situations where in the Middle East they'll find a solution.
Yeah, exactly.
They may not always follow through on everything they say they're going to do, because they have some crazy ideas, and some of them are wonderful, some of them are fanciful. But you look at how much has been developed over recent years.
It's
phenomenal.
Crazy pace, isn't it? Insane pace. But so just to end up, what do you think are the three big things that a business owner of any size should be looking for on a weekly and monthly basis to make sure they're on track? What would you say, like dashboards? And let me add to that as well. You know the Brad Sugar sings, like, we begin the end in mind, and so on, and so like you get, well, when's your selling date? And you think, okay, well, I don't want to sell, let's say, but no, okay, if you're not going to sell, then you have to have the company that works without you, so it becomes a profitable enterprise, and so on. But with that in mind, let's say, for instance, that is the goal. Let's say my date is 20th of April 2030.
Yeah.
What sort of things should I be keeping on track until then? And also, what are the key elements that I should be working towards, ready for it to sell, let's say?
Did you say on a weekly or a monthly basis? A weekly basis.
Well, a weekly and monthly, what would you say? Just sort of like a real top-down, from a board point of view, but bearing in mind it's SMEs and so on.
Yeah. Well, firstly, I suppose I'd be looking at where my sales are in relation to my targets, because you can do that a weekly, monthly, or whatever basis. But you need to be looking at your sales and your pipeline on a weekly basis and making sure you're on track. The second thing is cash, and making sure that you are monitoring all of your inflows and outflows and your working capital. And I think the third thing probably then is looking at your milestones on the initiatives that you are targeting, and making sure that they're on track. I mean, there are a whole bunch of other things, of course. I mean, I've left out the really important ingredient of people and the welfare of the employee group. But in terms of just pure sort of KPIs, I think those would be my three, I think.
And you mentioned just two of those were on track, so you have to plan to make sure they're on track.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure that you're heading in the right direction. You have to have that plan to make sure you're heading in the right direction. So that goes back to what we mentioned about planning. And on your view, what do you think the difference is between customer service and customer experience?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, customer experience is what you deliver. Customer experience is what the customer receives. For me, the most important thing is what the customer receives. You can tick all the boxes on your customer service kind of thing. If it's not satisfying the customer at the end of the day, then you have something wrong. So for me, customer experience is always kind of the number one, and I think that making sure you have a close enough relationship with your customer to keep getting accurate feedback all the time is absolutely critical.
Yeah, that's
you want to know want to know what they are thinking. It doesn't matter what your internal people are telling you about how well they are doing on their metrics. Is the acid test is your clients, are they feeling that?
Yeah, that's very valuable actually. That feedback, that constant feedback. It's that's a big thing. I've never touched on that really, but that is a really big thing, isn't it? Getting that, because they're the one that's receiving your product. So how's your product coming across? How's it making them feel?
Yeah.
What's the deliverabilities of all of that?
Yeah.
So that's very valuable. We've run out of time a little bit. I wanted to get your thoughts on AI, but I don't think we've got time on that one. That's the whole subject. But quickly, 30 seconds.
Okay. You can edit out the other bit on my philosophical waffle about the mental people.
So AI, by 2030, how do you think it's going to affect businesses?
I think it's going to take out huge amounts of the grunt sort of work, a lot of the sort of the lower end, which is good and bad. It's great in the sense that I think it will make it much more efficient, but I also think that it will take away quite a lot of the learning opportunities for people to move up. But I think it would transform the way we do pretty well everything. I mean, so much of what we do, and quite a lot of our creative industries. I mean, creative industries is a huge money earner for this country. But when you think that, stuff that's done by architects and engineers and designers and musicians and writers and everything else, I mean, awful that it's going to get.
It's crazy.
It's going to get gobbled up by. So it'll be interesting. I mean, we always reinvent ourselves and find something we can do. But
definitely,
I thought it was interesting that. I think the Big Four accountants said 44%. They were down on the graduate intake by 44% this year, largely because AI is taking those jobs.
I was going to say that because of AI, yeah.
So I think fantastic opportunities, but I don't think we're policing it enough at the moment. I don't think we are fully cognizant of the downsides. I think we should embrace the good bits, but I also think we should be a little guarded about before we get bit by it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I share that view as well. And you're a consultant for Evoke. Where can people find you and sort of get in touch with you if they wanted to?
LinkedIn, which is probably the easiest because my contact details are on LinkedIn. Through Evoke.
Okay, brilliant. Well, Steve, thanks very much.
What's a pleasure?
It's been a pleasure. It's been a real treat.
Thanks,
Thank you
Brad.
very much.
Okay.
Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, I just like, it's funny because I knew you're experienced guy, but it's only like when you sit down, you actually have a conversation like this, and you realise that, you know, like where you've been, the whole thing about it, and just how much you know. Because it's funny you mentioned about the leadership and the culture and how you've been able to be adaptable to each role that you've had to have, and the characteristics that you've adopted to fulfil those roles is really quite brilliant to hear. So yeah, it's good. Thanks very much.
Good. Well, I hope I didn't waffle on too much.
Oh no, it's fine. No, I love it because it's